Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mark from the States. How we doing today? I am doing fantastic. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today. You guys are amazing. Come sit with me. Big fake couch. You know the deal here. You're going to notice these links below me here in the description. One of them takes you to this video that we're going to learn from today. And the other is going to take you to the History Guy channel. Today's video is, of course, by the History Guy, and it's called the Thames Tunnel. We're going to learn something I know for me is going to be something new, hopefully for you as well. But I really encourage you to get over there and support his channel. I cannot stress that enough, right? We talk about this every time. He's given us his blessing to be able to learn and see new and incredible things from his work. So for us, it is important that we get over there and support his channel. This video has come requested, which is always special when a video request is one of the channels that has given us his blessing to watch. So please get over there. One of them, again, will be me without, go to the video if you don't want to hear me yapping. And in fact, I encourage you to do that. And then come back and you can let me know what I inevitably going to miss and give me some context. This is how I learn if you are new to our channel. I learn from the video, of course, but also from all of you who add context and other bits of information in the chat, in the comments, or in my email, which is also below if you're not familiar with it. So I invite all of you to come hang out. Let's learn something today. A lot of you may have already know this information, which is great because then you can add to it. And it's just such a wonderful community. Our channel is special. So let's go ahead and do that. Is everybody ready here? Everybody's good? Okay. History Guy, we like him. Let's do it.
In 1800, London was the largest city in the world. More than 1 million people lived within the greater London area. It was the center of an empire that would only become more dominant over the course of the century. And so there in the 19th century, London was among the first cities to face issues of urban growth that seem all too familiar in today's much more urban 21st century. And among those was getting between the banks of the River Thames, because those banks held the docks that received the bounty of the empire that came up the river from the channel. And if you built a bridge across the river, it could interfere with that important trade. And so in the early part of the 19th century, engineers began to explore the only other option. If you could not go over the River Thames, could you go under? It is history that deserves to be remembered. In 1798, civil engineer Ralph Dodd, employed to do a survey of engineering works, first suggested a tunnel under the River Tyne in northern England. He suggested several other tunnels before he proposed a tunnel beneath the Thames between Tilbury and Gravesend. The military was especially interested.
People must think you're a little nutty if you're one of the first to say, let's go under. People are probably like, what? I can only imagine the looks he must have gotten.
Interested in such a tunnel, which would allow the transfer of troops and material between Kent and Essex. And despite opposition complaining that we are invited down a steep ravine to leave the warm precincts of cheerful day to enter regions of utter darkness and cold obstruction, an act was passed to form a tunnel company, and a shaft was sunk in 1799. The entire project was a failure from the beginning. The engineers in charge argued over the design, and despite a stem pump, the tunnel was constantly full of water. By 1802, operations had stumbled to a close. In 1805, the Thames Archway Company was formed to dig another tunnel, beginning with a driftway that would drain the ground before they built a larger tunnel for traffic. At first, the project seemed to proceed much better than the last, but soft soil and quicksand soon made further digging impossible. The directors offered £500 for new plans, and 49 were presented to them. All were deemed unsuitable, and a report determined that an underground tunnel, which would be useful to the public and beneficial to adventurers, is impracticable. As with so many impracticable things, they would be proven wrong. Mark Isambard Brunell arrived in England in 1799.
Well, we all know who that is. That is a famous name that I've learned through our time with our channel here. It's crazy to think, to me. This is starting in the late 1700s. They're thinking of doing this, and early 1800s, physically trying to figure it out, even after failures, still trying to figure out the best way forward here. It's just, I'm always amazed by the ingenuity that spawns from your island. It's pretty remarkable. Just the feats that you would think are impossible become reality,
Under the Admiralty with a machine that could automate the production of ship blocks. The Royal Navy was struggling to produce enough to outfit their fleet, and his invention was quickly successful. 45 of the machines were installed at Portsmouth. Born in Rouen in 1769, Brunel had left France during the Revolution because he supported the monarchy. He has spent several years in America as the chief engineer of the city of New York and even submitted designs for the U.S. Capitol building in Washington.
Did I know
Though
this?
he was a prolific inventor, he was often involved in unprofitable projects and was not himself a good money manager. In 1817, a friend was aghast at the finances of Brunel's factory, reporting that it was a most extraordinary jumble, which you have certainly not understood. I should hardly have been more surprised than I am if one of your saws had walked into town. In 1821, he spent 88 days in a debtor's prison with his wife. His engineering work had already brought him fame, if not fortune, and he was contacted by Tsar Alexander I of Russia to build a bridge across the Neva River in St. Petersburg. It was an incredibly challenging engineering project. The river's 800 feet wide where the bridge was to be built and froze completely in the winter. Brunel first thought a bridge was impractical and instead seriously considered digging a tunnel. But the problems of the tunnel, though interesting, eventually gave way to the plan of an ambitious bridge. The bridge idea was dismissed by Alexander's ministers, but Brunel, wasting away in jail, decided that work in Russia would be better than his lot in England. I must starve or get employment here or go to Russia, Brunel wrote. The threat of losing a talented engineer to Russia suddenly stirred the English government, and no less than the Duke of Wellington asked the Prime Minister what the government was doing to keep Brunel in England. The government paid his debts. Brunel's planning for the Neva Bridge had inspired him to consider tunneling, and in 1818 he published a patent specification for forming drifts and tunnels underground, along with Lord Cochrane. The patent described the problems of digging a tunnel for ground traffic, but also his thoughts on how to overcome them. Most important was what he called a great shield. He compared his process to the Teredo nivalis, or shipworm, kind of mollusk that bores through wood by eating it and filling the hole behind with the excrement. His shields would be enclosed on three sides and hold up the excavation while miners worked to dig out the soil in front of them. The shield could then be ratcheted forward using hydraulic rams and could crawl forward having a tunnel behind them. We may soon anticipate a speedy and total change in the face of the maps of this great metropolis, he said, referring to London. The parish of Rotherhithe will soon display a scene of activity that is not to be witnessed anywhere else. Brunel had examined the work of the failed Archway Company, which had identified the soil strata. He believed the good blue clay lay in a layer under the river and that the tunnel could be dug between the clay and the quicksand which had ruined the former attempt. To dig the tunnel, he planned a square shield made up of 12 frames that altogether could excavate a face of 380 square feet. The frames would resemble hollow books, each with 3 cells on top of one another where miners could work. At each end would be a shaft, 50 feet in diameter, where gently sloping stairs would allow entrance to the tunnel. Vehicle traffic in the form of carts and wagons would be enabled by great descents, spiral ramps that would descend to the tunnel level beneath the river. Mark's only son, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, was 16 when he began working with his father. He did a good amount of the engineering preparations in 1823 while the elder Brunel sought support for the project. Support abounded. Nearly everyone was excited about the new communication between the banks of the river. A committee was formed in 1824 to garner subscriptions, and within 3 days, the sum pledged to the amount of £179,900. Parliament passed a bill for making and maintaining a tunnel under the Thames, which granted royal assent on June 24, 1824. Brunell was made engineer to the company, and after surveying work, began the project in February 1825. The tunnel was to cross the river less than a mile from the failed Thames archway and would connect Rotherhithe on the south bank and Wapping on the north. The first stage of the project was to sink the enormous shaft that would lead down on the south side of the bank. Brunel constructed an iron ring 50 feet in diameter above ground with a sharp edge against the ground. A 40-foot-tall brick wall was built on top of the ring. Workers removed soil from the ring's edge, which slowly sank into the ground under its own weight, like an enormous cookie cutter. As with nearly any engineering project, problems abounded. Brunel insisted on using Roman cement to seal the brickwork, but argued endlessly with the treasurer over the cost. A brick supply was difficult to obtain, and of an initial order of 500,000 bricks, only 53,000 were delivered. But the shaft continued to sink. One writer wrote that the crashing sound produced by the entrance of the iron curb into the gravel, being reverberated from the walls of the tower, had a striking, not to say startling, effect. The tower was designed to secure the top part of the whole shaft. It was in place in June, and from there the shaft was manually dug and the walls bricked. Brunel's great shield was built nearby, and the 12 frames were in place in the shaft by November 21st. The 12 frames were moved into place, each to hold around 50 tons of earth and river above them as they slowly tunneled forward. The process was for the odd-numbered frames to slowly dig forward about 4 inches, placing boards to shore up the walls as they went. Once done, great screw jacks braced against brickwork behind them shoved the frame forward against the new wall. Next, the even-numbered frames repeated the process, and the entire shield shambled forward like a 12-footed beast. Behind them, brickwork was continually laid. Working in the gloomy ground, with only candles for light and a huge number of workers, miners, carpenters.
It must have been terrible to work down there. By candlelight? I mean, are we kidding here? That's incredible. I mean, the men that are working down in these conditions, building this thing, wow. Just incredible. I mean, I would be scared to death thinking that water would just be busting through at any time, even though you're going through, earth, but still knowing all that water above your head, just wild to think about. And it's what, I mean, of course he thought of that worm that would eat wood and, put the waste out the backside there. And then seeing that and then developing this device, lack of a better word, for his wall, to keep digging and allow it to keep moving forward, and then the men behind him to remove dirt and brick as they go. Brunel, that is and then to see that his son is there, and knowing, what his son will end up doing, incredible things of his own, but and the fact that he was in debtor's prison, and he was going to go to Russia to build a bridge, and the government said we can't lose him, or was convinced that they couldn't lose him to Russia, and so they paid his debt. That's wild.
Bricklayers and men carrying out the dirt was cramped and difficult. Yeah. 12,000 bricks were laid for each foot the tunnel advanced. The largely illiterate and untrained miners struggled to take care of the complex shield, and parts of it were often damaged. At times, they could progress as far as 12 feet a week, but at others, problems kept them to mere inches. Construction quickly fell behind, and it became clear the tunnel was unlikely to be completed in the estimated 3 years. Perhaps most costly for the project were arguments between the court, as the board of directors styled themselves, and Brunel. Especially opposed was the chairman, William Smith, an MP who generally thought Brunel a hack and even believed the shield to be unnecessary. Burgeoning costs inspired the company to allow visitors into the tunnel, which brought in hundreds of onlookers a day to view the work. The money was necessary, but not enough. Brunell made preparations to seal the tunnel as work continued at a crawl. Brunell's son, Isambard, was especially vital, and in 1826 became the resident engineer, essentially in charge of day-to-day operations. Problems never ceased. In May of 1827, miners went on strike protesting cuts to their wages. The same month, the greatest of their troubles began. Isambard was in the tunnel when the roar of water drowned out all other sound. The tunnel was 549 feet long, not quite halfway to the northern shore, but it had met the bottom of the river. The engineers later found that dredging had left a trench in the river which they had run into.
Oh, no.
Everyone was able to escape, but the tunnel was filled with water and silt.
That's
Using
my
a
fear.
diving bell, Isambard measured the trench in the river, and bags of clay, chains, and more were sunk to seal the breach. At one point, Isambard was able to actually hand objects through the diving bell to the workers on the frame. Miraculously, the situation was salvaged and tunneling allowed to continue.
No.
In January of 1828, another flood nearly killed Isambard and did kill 6 workers. Isambard had reached the visitor's entrance, but the door was locked, and if a contractor had not been near to break the door down and drag the unconscious man out, Isambard would have died. 4,500 tons of clay and gravel again filled in the hole, but the financial situation was dire. Wellington tried to save the project, saying there is no work upon which the public interest of foreign nations had been more excited than it has been upon the tunnel. Men cannot but see great political, military, as well as commercial profit that will be derived. But even the assistance of Wellington himself couldn't convince the public. And after the second flood, the company couldn't raise enough money to continue digging.
Oh, no.
The project was, from the first, in the very first class of desperate hazards, a letter to the Times argued. Should it be completed, it will always be liable to disruption and the consequent sudden annihilation of all within. A satirical poem by one James Smith read, "That very mishap where the Thames forced a gap and made it fit haunt for an otter has proved that your scheme is no catchpenny dream. They can't say 'twill never hold water." The frames were sealed behind a wall, and the dreams of a tunnel ended for a time. But Brunell never gave up on the project, pushed aside other engineers' suggestions and the board's cost-cutting measures. And after nearly 7 years, Brunell was able to secure the needed money, which included a £243,000 loan from the government. To address the problems they had already faced, Brunell designed a new shield, which would overlap the brickwork ceiling to prevent it from buckling under the river. The old frames, each weighing 7 tons, were removed, and the new frames were stronger and included tails to hold up the cavern's roof. Troubles were not entirely over with, as water continued to seep into the tunnel, sometimes as fast as 500 gallons a minute.
Jeez.
Isambard was at that point much in demand elsewhere and unable to help with the project. Large amounts of gas, like hydrogen sulfide and methane, made workers sick and occasionally lose consciousness, and explosions became routine as pockets of gas caught fire. The tunnel was...
How on earth did this even get finished? Couple water collapse, water breaking through, people dying, gases. I mean, how did this work stoppage because they ran out of money? Way overdue, behind schedule. Just remarkable. Says a lot about the man.
Inundated several more times during the work, but the workers were better prepared for it. And each time the river broke in, the riverbed was covered in more clay, and the workers went back to work. By inches and feet, the tunnel reached the north shore, and in September of 1840, a second cookie cutter was under construction to sink the shaft on the north bank. The shaft was sunk through the ruins of an ancient shipyard, which was simply thrown aside with the mud in the years before archaeological surveys. The impressive engineering marvel, which had pushed the boundaries of 19th century technology, was finally nearing completion. "I am truly happy," Brunell wrote, "to be able to say that my arduous enterprise is drawing to a conclusion. It has been one of inconceivable labors, difficulties, and dangers." In March of 1841, as the tower was being sunk, Mark Isambard Brunell was knighted by Queen Victoria.
Oh, nice.
By November, the tunnel had reached the shaft, and the 1,200-foot-long tunnel was complete. It took most of another 2 years to pave, whitewash, and prepare the tunnel for pedestrians. Large walkways were built, lighting was installed, and superstructures built over each entrance. In March 1843, the tunnel was opened to pedestrian traffic. For a penny apiece, 50,000 people passed through the tunnel in the first 27 hours. Less than 4 months later, the millionth traveler passed through the arches. It had taken
Wow.
18 years, immense effort, cost more than a dozen lives, and blown through nearly every cent given to it. But there was at last a walking tunnel beneath a great river.
And here's the thing. You know people have died in there. You know people had to deal with water busting through. And still you had all these people lining up to go and paying for the privilege to go walk through the tunnel. I'd be freaking out. But different times. It's just, it's pretty remarkable. It really is. So 1843 is when it opened. Wow.
The great descents that would have allowed wheeled vehicles to travel the tunnel were never built. Indeed, the cost had been so great that the board cut corners on properly draining the tunnel and putting in better ventilation. It filled with street vendors by day, and by night the homeless paid a penny to sleep there.
Oh, man.
The penny toll was not enough to pay even the interest on the government loan. Despite 1.8 million people passing through it in the first year, it was never a significant financial success. 6 years after the tunnel was opened, Sir Mark Isambard Brunell died at the age of 80. The tunnel was his last major project.
That's a long life.
His son, Isambard, is considered one of the most ingenious and prolific figures in engineering history, far overshadowing his father in fame. The tunnel, while not financially successful, was nonetheless a marvel. An American traveler described it as the eighth wonder of the world and claimed that no one goes to London without visiting the tunnel, although others decried it as a haunt for criminals and prostitutes. The tunnel was converted into a railway tunnel in the 1860s, finally attaining the usefulness that it had originally promised. Ironically, neither Brunel lived to see the trains run. Isambard Kingdom Brunel passed away in 1859. It later became part of the London Underground. Parts of it has been preserved, parts reinforced, and it now serves as part of the London Overground. The former engine house is now open as the Brunel Museum. The influence of the project as the first large tunnel known to be dug using a tunneling shield is significant, and the Institute of Civil Engineers has designated the tunnel an International Historic Civil Engineering Landmark. Tunneling shield technology would continue to develop over the following decades, and many more subaqueous tunnels would be built. And in fact, it was tunneling shield technology that allowed the construction of subways in the century that followed. And the American Society of Civil Engineers notes that Brunel's original tunnels are still the most watertight part of the London Underground system. And perhaps the most impressive part of the entire project was Brunel's persistence, because without that, the project almost certainly never would have been completed. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguideguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on Forgotten History, all you have to do...
Please go support his channel. Links, of course, are below. It's important that you do so. Thank you so much in advance for all of you going over there. I know a lot of people already follow him. I get requests to do a lot of his videos, so this was interesting. Yes, I hear about, of course, Kingdom Brunel. Of course, he's done so much stuff, but nice to do a video on his father. You hear that name Brunel, and Isambard Brunel, and you're just like, yeah, we've heard that name before. And normally it's on the sun, but yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know if I would be one. I guess it's different times because it's this remarkable achievement, which it is. But paying to just walk the tunnel, but like I said, different times. Entertainment, seeing something that you never seen before. So yeah, I guess a lot of people just either A, didn't know about all the mishaps and all that business, or B, just are a lot braver than me. Being in a tunnel, knowing that there's been water breaks and just all the water above your head just freaks me out. I couldn't imagine working something like that. Wow. Let's hear it up for the workers, right? Most of them, if not all of them, weren't really educated. So they're doing this pretty intricate building and construction and digging and moving this thing. And pretty remarkable. So, I mean, a lot of people were hurt in making the building of this, and it's remarkable. So, wild. I hope you enjoyed that. That was it was interesting. That was interesting. We've learned a lot about bridges that go over the Thames. Not really a bunch about the tunnels that go under. And nowadays, of course, it's most people don't even think about it. They just get on the underground and away they go. But even here, like in New York, even in San Francisco, they have the BART Bay Area Rapid Transit, which goes underneath the San Francisco Bay from Oakland to San Francisco. So there's, I've been on that, so I've gone under large bodies of water. Still freaky though. You just got to kind of put it out of your mind. I hope that the train doesn't break down while you're under there, but it's just, it's pretty wild that someone could go, yes, let's do that, and this is how we're going to do it. So, smarter people than me can totally, it's wild. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. Thank you so much for being a part of our channel. Again, go support History Guy. Links below. And hope to see you soon. Have a great day. We'll talk later. Bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And he's from